Okay, Andrea, good touch. Thank you for that. Andrea, 4 Cups of Wine Levine, producing. Hi, everybody. Chag Sameach. We're going to begin our Leil Tikkun Shavuot. Good thing you don't need a minyan for a tikkun, but maybe there's some people watching on streaming. I don't think we're on Facebook. It's nice for a change. But for everyone who's here, welcome. If you have a Tanakh, you can get it. Or if you have another device like your phone and you want to Google these verses as I read them, that might be helpful, but you don't need to because I'm just going to read them. So if you want to just lean back and listen, that would be really nice. So what I want to do today, in the half hour that I have, what we're going to do is I'm going to teach for a half hour, then Rabbi Aklepi for a half hour, then Rabbi Greengrass for a half hour. What I would like to do today is try to figure out who is the Eshet Chayil in the Tanakh. What is the Eshet Chayil? Now, it's good that we're all women here. And and only women to teach about the Eshet Chayil. If a man comes, it's okay. He can listen. He can listen. But what we're trying to figure out is who is the Eshet Chayil, and once we do figure that out at the end, then it will become clear why the Eshet Chayil is directly related to Shavuot. Now, for those of you who aren't sure, what is Eshet Chayil, period? Eshet Chayil is the woman of valor. And if you're a member of Temple Beth Am, you know Women of Valor because we have the Women of Valor Award every couple of years that we give to 2 or 3 or 4 women, and it's a really big deal, and we have a huge luncheon, and it's a very special occasion. We often read, or a husband traditionally will read the Women of Valor to his wife or say it to his wife by heart, either every night or on Shabbat, on Friday nights. And we often read the Women of Valor. It's included traditionally in the liturgy of a funeral for a woman. We say, who is the Woman of Valor? My grandmother, particularly, my father's mother, when she passed away, she made us promise not to read the Woman of Valor at her funeral because she felt that Women of Valor was read at so many women's funerals that she's been to, and the women didn't deserve to be called Women of Valor, that she didn't feel that it held any water. So she said, at my funeral, I don't want the Woman of Valor. Okay, whatever. I didn't get my sense of humor out of thin air. You know, this has been passed down from generations and generations and been refined over the years. Thank goodness Ed is here, so it's not just me and women talking about women. All right. Hi, Ed. Chag Sameach. Okay, so we're trying to figure out when the Tanakh, and most specifically the book of Proverbs, talks about what is the woman of valor. The question is, who is it? Who is the woman of valor that they're talking about? So what I would like to do, if you want to Google it, you can, or if you have a Tanakh, or if you have a different device, you can. I'm looking at Proverbs chapter 31. Proverbs chapter 31, but I'm just going to read it. You don't need to go anywhere. I'm just going to read it. Here's what it says. It says this. The words of King Lemuel, the burden with which his mother corrected him. What, my son, and what son of my womb, and what son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, nor your ways to that which destroys kings. It is not for kings, Lemuel, It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes to say, what is this strong drink? So what's going on here? There's a king named Lemuel. And when we read this, we read it like if you were reading this in a class, you would say, okay, the words of King Lemuel. And his mother starts talking to him. And his mother starts to say to him, who are these women that you're dating? You don't seem to be doing a very good job. I'm not impressed with the women you're bringing home. So the first thing we might say is, who's Lemuel? So what we do when we read this, if we're in a room, I would do the same thing. I was like, oh yeah, Lemuel, and I would pretend that I had any clue who we were talking about. But the truth is, we don't know. There's no way you know who Lemuel is as you're reading the book of Proverbs. Now, the book of Proverbs would only be talking about the kings of Israel. Now, there are two types of kings of Israel. There's the southern kingdom called Judah and the northern kingdom called Israel. But one thing that we know is if you look through all the lists of the kings of Judah and all the lists of the kings of Israel, there's no one who's called Lemuel. Now, there is in another place in the Torah the name Lael, and what it means is to be consecrated to God. Lael, for God. Lemuel, towards God. But he's nobody. We don't know who he is. So there are theories as to who this guy is. Who might we guess it is? Well, here's what we're doing. We're looking now at the book of Proverbs. So a good question to ask is, if we want to know who Lemuel is, what this is all talking about, we could look in the Talmud and try to figure out, well, who wrote the book of Proverbs? So, by the way, what I've read to you so far is Proverbs 1, chapter 31, 1 through 9. Okay? And what 1 through 9 is 9 verses in which the mother of a king is saying to the king, you're not good at choosing women. Your relationships, you have not found the one. You've found a lot of them who aren't the one, but you haven't found the one, and I'm not impressed. That's verses 1 through 9. Verses 10 through 31, after this preamble, verses 10 through 31, that's the section of the Eshet Chayil. So what do we have in chapter 31 of Proverbs? We have a section where there's a mother of a king telling the king, you have not found the right woman. And then we have verses 10 through 31 explaining what is the woman of valor. In other words, here's the kind of woman that I would like you to find. So normally what we could say is, if we figured out who Lemuel was, and we could figure out who Lemuel's wife is, the one that really worked out, we could say, her. She's the woman of valor. She's the Eshet Chayil. She's the woman that all Jewish women should strive to be like. The problem is, Lemuel is a weird name. It's not one of the kings of Israel. We don't know who that guy is. So the Talmud, in a tractate called Bava Batra, says, I'll tell you who Lemuel is. Well, I don't know who Lemuel is, but what I do know is who wrote the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs was written by one of the kings of Israel whose name was Chizkiah. Okay, Chizkiah, but who's Chizkiah? Chizkiah might have been a guy who was writing stories about a different king. And who's this different king? The Talmud goes on and tells you in a different spot, King Solomon. And most people will tell you that Lemuel is King Solomon. That's who we're dealing with. Now, that shouldn't be a surprise to us, because Jewish tradition tells us that there are 3 sections of the Ketuvim, of the third part of the Tanakh, the K part, or the Ch part of Tanakh, the writings, that are essentially based on or written by King Solomon. And they are Proverbs, Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes. Now, what are those three books? Song of Songs is traditionally about the early life of King Solomon. Okay. And Proverbs is about the middle part of his life, and Kohelet is about the later part of his life. So what we're looking at here, this section of the Tanakh, of Mishlei, is a section of the story that had to do with Solomon's life. Now, if we can say that Lemuel is Solomon, and I'll give you some evidence as to why most people think that is the case, then who is the mother that is talking to him? Who was Solomon's mother? Solomon's mother was, Ed just said it, even though he's muted, I could read his lips, Bathsheba, or Bathsheba, Bathsheba. You remember the story? King David was looking out through his window. He saw Bathsheba was bathing herself. He said, I would like to marry her. He found out that she was married. He told her husband to go to the front lines. He assigned her husband, Uriah the Hittite, to the front lines. He was killed on the front lines, and Bathsheba became newly single. Right? Now, King David, God had some words for him later on in the Tanakh about this whole incident. But either way, the marriage of Bathsheba and King David produced King Solomon. So what we see here is what's going on here is possibly and probably a conversation between King Solomon and his mother Bathsheba. Why would we think that this is a story between those two? Well, First Kings tells us that King Solomon had 1,000 wives. 1,000 wives. So 700 royal wives and 300 concubines. So he was a busy guy, King Solomon. Now, why did he have so many royal wives? If you look at the end of the story, it looked like Solomon was the worst king ever. He started worshiping the idols of these other women and doing horrible things. But his original intent was good. His goal was to marry the princess or queen of every nation and thereby get them to convert all of their people to Judaism. And had he been successful, all of the world would have been converted to Judaism. But we don't do that. That's not how you're supposed to do it. You can't be converted by your king and then all of a sudden be forced to be Jewish. Jews don't do that. You can only be Jewish if you have it in your heart that you want to fulfill the mitzvot. So this well-intended plan of King Solomon was very ill-conceived. And so these first 9 verses are, there's a line in the movie Goodfellas where Joe Pesci's mom says to him, why don't you settle down with a good woman? And Joe Pesci says, I settle down with a good woman every night. It's not what she meant. It's not what she meant. And King Solomon had a little bit of the same problem. He was bringing home a different woman every night, over 1,000 wives. So you might understand now, with that information, why is it that his mother is lecturing him about finding the right woman and saying to him, you haven't done it? Well, then he says, then Bathsheba gets into a description. And this is what I want to share with you now. What is the Eshet Chayil? So the Eshet Chayil, this is really amazing. So if I'm looking at verse 10 of chapter 31 of Proverbs. Now, you might be thinking, this is the lightning round. I thought this was going to be really cool. So far, it's not that interesting. Don't worry. This is all background for when it's going to get really cool, which is coming. But without this background, you couldn't get to it. So what I'd like to do is share with you the idea of who is the Eshet Chayil. who is the woman of valor that the Bible is talking about? I'd like to give you three opinions. One opinion of a contemporary rabbi, a rabbi who I often listen to his lectures, and he gives great opinions. Rabbi Mordechai Torgziner from Toronto. He's a contemporary rabbi. One from a 19th century rabbi, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who gave a slightly different take. And then maybe a slightly more famous rabbi, my own personal opinion. It's a joke. These other rabbis are well known. It's a joke. When you're muted, I can't hear you laughing, but that reminds me of Torah study because I often tell jokes there that nobody laughs. And so actually this feels pretty similar. All right, now, let's just put this into perspective. There are two sections of chapter 31. The first section was verses 1 through 9, where Lemuel's mother, who's probably Bathsheba, who's probably talking to King Solomon, is telling him 1,000 wives isn't working for me. It would be nice if you could settle down and find the one. Now, what is the one? Solomon or Lemuel or whoever he is might say, well, what do you mean? What should I look for in a woman? To which Bathsheba begins by saying, look for an Eshet Chayil. Look for a woman of valor. So here's what she says. You know, I don't have to read the whole thing to you, but I'll tell you how it breaks down. Verses 10 through 12 talk about how a husband is fortunate if he finds an Eshet Chayil, right? Eshet Chayil miyimsa, a woman of valor who can find. And if you do, that's more precious than fine pearls. That's verses 10 through 12. So the first thing she says is a woman that you would be fortunate to have. Second thing, verses 13 through 18 say a woman who's a hard worker and has a good work ethic. Okay, so what do we want so far? A woman that you would be lucky to have who's got a good work ethic. Verses 19 through 25, a woman who is generous, who does tzedakah. Okay, now we're talking. I mean, you know, if you could get any one of those three things in your wife, that would be good. But if you got all three, that's a trifecta. A woman you'd be fortunate to have, a woman who's got a good work ethic, a woman who's generous, and then Bathsheba says in verses 26 and 27, a woman who teaches chesed, a woman who has kindness on her lips. Not only does she do kind acts, but she teaches other people to do kindness, right? When we say this, we say a woman who has kindness on her lips, meaning she shares her kindness, her chesed with other people. And finally, verses 28 through 31, a woman who's praiseworthy, who's mishubechet, right? She's deserving of praise. If you could find any woman who has all of these things, that's the woman that you should go for. As opposed to these other 1,000 women that you've been bringing home who are actually the complete opposite of that. And if you look at the end of the book of Kings, you see it explains who they are. These are people who are taking Solomon away from doing mitzvot. These are people who are bringing their idols into Jerusalem and doing all these horrible things, everything that God hates. Okay, now, here's what Rabbi Mordechai Torgziner, the first opinion I would like to bring, would contend. He would contend that there's only one woman in the entire Tanakh that this refers to. And the reason he does that is because what he does is he points out 6 different times where the word chayil is used in the Tanakh. 6 different times where the word chayil is used in the Tanakh. And if you look through the Tanakh to all of those different places, you find the word chayil used, and it's used in the same way that Bathsheba uses it. So in other words, I pointed out so far 6 qualities that Bathsheba said you should look for in a wife, right? We just went through those. Someone you'd be fortunate to have, someone who works hard, someone who's generous, someone who teaches chesed, and someone who's praiseworthy. So 5 things. What Rabbi Tortziner has done is he's went through the Tanakh and he found that there are 5 places where the word chayil is used, and all 5 of those places refer to one of the characteristics that Bathsheba was speaking about. In other words, what Bathsheba did, or what the composer of chapter 31 of Proverbs did, using Bathsheba as his puppet or as his character, is saying every time the Tanakh mentions chayil, valor, that's what you should look for in a woman. And what Bathsheba does for her son Solomon is to coordinate all of these. Well, what Rabbi Tortziner did was went back and did the research, looked for all the places where it said chayil, and found that the word chayil talked about a woman who's kind, a woman who's you'd be fortunate to have, a woman who's praiseworthy, a woman who's generous, a woman who has a good work ethic. What he also then did was something fascinating. Because if you don't believe him there, if you don't believe him that that's enough evidence that chayil defines what it is by looking through all the Tanakh and looking at that word, what Rabbi Tortziner has done is said, there's only one person in the Tanakh that the Tanakh uses to describe Eshet Chayil. And who is it? It's in chapter 3, verse 11 of the book of Ruth. Ruth, according to Rabbi Mordechai Tortziner, but also according to the Tanakh, the only person in the entire Tanakh who is called specifically Eshet Chayil is Ruth. And where is it? Chapter 3 of Ruth, verse 11, where it says, "Now, daughter, fear not, I will do for you all you say, for the entire gate of my nations know that you are an Eshet Chayil." In other words, Boaz, this Jewish guy who's going to redeem her and marry her because he's a kinsman of Naomi, her mother-in-law, actually says about her, actually describes Ruth as, you are an Eshet Chayil. So the first opinion I want to give you is that Ruth, who we read her Haftorah on Shavuot because she converted to Judaism and she accepted the Torah, and Shavuot is all about accepting the Torah, to be an Eshet Chayil, when we say that when Jewish men say that to their wives, or when we read that at a funeral, what we're saying about this woman is, be like Ruth. Be like the woman who said, I want to convert to Judaism. I want your God to be my God. I want your people to be my people. Now, that's one opinion. Another opinion is this. The famous Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch once said, or once explained it this way. Don't just read it as Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. Read the whole first verse of the Eshet Chayil, of the woman of valor, in which it says, Eshet Chayil mi yimsa, a woman of valor who can find. And actually, this verse, Rabbi Hirsch, now this is a drash. This is not pshat. This is not the basic understanding. This is him going deep. But we like to go deep here. What he's saying is, Eshet Chayil mi yimsa, a woman of valor who can find, is not a description of a woman. It's a description of a man. Eshet Chayil mi yimsa. Who's the me? A woman of valor who can find. In other words, this is a challenge to the man, saying a woman of valor who can find it. And this is exactly what Bathsheba is saying to Solomon. A woman of valor, can you please go out and find one woman besides these 1,000 other women that you've already brought home who aren't bringing you closer to Torah? Could you go out and try to find someone who's like Ruth, your great-great-grandmother, Ruth? Could you try to find someone like her? So what Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch was saying is, Eshet Chayil mi yimsa means a woman of valor who can find. Can you go out and earn it? So far, you found a lot of women that don't do it. You haven't earned yet the right woman. You haven't lived up to your duties following Torah and being a righteous person and found the right woman. So those are two interesting ideas. I want to, in my last 5 minutes, bring this back to Shavuot and discuss why we're talking about this. Well, why we're talking about this is because Ruth is the Haftarah we read on Shavuot, because Ruth converted and accepted Torah. And so on Shavuot, as we celebrate Chag Matan Torah, the holiday of accepting Torah, we should each be like Ruth and try to understand that we're accepting the Torah anew every year. So I think what this is saying is the woman, Eshet Chayil, doesn't refer to a woman. Eshet Chayil mi yimsa, a woman of valor who can find. We want to find what Ruth found. We want to find what eluded King Solomon, which is Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. But I think what it means here is that Eshet Chayil doesn't mean a woman of valor. Eshet Chayil is a synonym for Torah. Eshet Chayil means, can you find and can you accept and can you do what Ruth did, which is to find Torah? So the reason that Eshet Chayil, according to Rabbi Torkziner, but what Rabbi Torkziner is really saying is, according to the Tanakh, why does Eshet Chayil, why does the woman of valor mean Ruth? Why is Ruth the only one in the entire Torah that's referred to as the woman of valor? Is because it doesn't mean simply Ruth. It means the action of Ruth. What's the action of Ruth? To accept Torah. Why do we read our Haftarah on Shavuot? Because this is when we accept Torah. So I would contend here that what the Eshet Chayil is all about is man's search for Torah. And for women, the woman's goal of trying to embody what God means by Torah. After all, the word Torah is a feminine word. And so Eshet Chayil indirectly refers to Ruth, but truly means Torah. And so mi yimsa, the search for all of us on this Shavuot, is to see if we can find not Ruth, but the action of Ruth, the acceptance of Torah. So Chag Shavuot Sameach. On this Shavuot, may we all be on the search so that by tomorrow, when Shavuot ends, we'll have once again accepted Torah anew this year, just like we do every single year. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will. Amen. Chag Sameach, everybody. I'm now going to turn over the lightning round to Rabbi Aklepi.
Okay, caught it. Hi, everybody. I can catch the lightning. So I'm going to then take this idea of Torah on Shavuot and give us some ideas of what studying on Shavuot and what Shavuot and Torah want us to do. One of the things we need to do for the holiday. Hello, dog. I start talking, dog comes to my lap. So I'm going to share my screen. Now, I was going to pull off the wall what I got for Mother's Day this year. I have a beautiful tapestry of Eshet Chayil in Hebrew, which was one of my Mother's Day gifts. And it was very, very, very pretty. Last year for my birthday, I got a little necklace with a pearl that said Eshet Chayil. So I'm going to try to not only embody Torah, but share some Torah with you. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, look, Alex brought it. Hang on.
It's from Jerusalem. Box from Jerusalem.
Okay. I think it's this one. Okay. Oh, and here's my beautiful tapestry. All the way from Jerusalem. Okay. It's a great segue for show and tell. So, Shavuot, strength from Torah. So what is the Torah wanting us to do? And we're going to talk a little bit about Shavuot, starting with a bunch of Torah texts. And the idea, starting with one of the names for Shavuot, is Yom HaBikurim, the day of the first fruits. So we have Shavuot, the counting of meaning weeks, the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot gives us the weeks, and we have plenty of texts that also refer to these are the weeks. And this holiday, this time I'm going to talk about what does it mean for the first fruits. So one of our issues of Shavuot, which is such a great and beautiful holiday, it is one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals. We decorate the synagogue, we can decorate the house and all kinds of florals and greenery. If you go back in the day to Kibbutzim, not just from the 50s and 60s, but even probably if currently, you would see that the tractors were covered in flowers. There was usually a parade of the animals that were born that year, the first fruits, as well as babies. So they'd plop the babies in the cart, and the service would plop babies in the cart and bring them up for a blessing. So this kind of celebration of life is part of what we're talking about when we're talking about the agricultural part of Shavuot. And sometimes we tend to separate, it's Zaman Natan Torah, the time we've gotten the Torah, and it's an agricultural festival, but really it is all interconnected. So think of green, think of flowers, think of all kinds of beautiful things. Andrea started our session with Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. One of the reasons why we are going to maybe eat cheesecake or something else, dairy. So if we look here, Yom HaBikurim in Numbers 28:26, can you see the text? Does it need to be bigger or smaller? Go like this if you can see it, or yes? Okay, Phyllis Waldman, I'm counting on you since I see you on my screen on the right. On the day of the first fruits, your feast of weeks, so we have both names of Yom HaKippurim. On the first few weeks, when you bring an offering of new grain to the Lord, you shall observe a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. So here's an overall idea. First fruits, feast of weeks. So we know it's 7 weeks after Pesach. You're going to bring an offering of new grain to the Lord, and it's a sacred occasion. You shall do no work. So let's see what that meant a little more clearly. What did one do on Shavuot? So we're going to go to, that was Bamidbar, that was Numbers. We're going to go to Deuteronomy and see, well, what were we supposed to do? V'lakachta me-reshit. You shall take some of every first fruit of the soil, which you harvest from the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Put it in a basket and go to the place where the Lord your God will choose to establish his name, God's name. Okay, so here's a directive. We know we're not supposed to do work, and now we know we're supposed to take of every first fruit of the soil and bring it to a place that God is going to tell us, where God is going to establish God's name. So the rabbis, and there's a lot of commentary. I just took our friend Rashi, wanted to discuss me-reshit, from the first, or does it mean really of the firsts, of the first meaning of the best. What does it mean? What are we bringing? What's the first fruit of the soil? Is it the first because we've entered the land, we've planted, and now here is our first? Or is it of those special fruits, which one are you bringing? So Rashi's going to say, then you shall take of the first of all the fruit of the ground. That's the section from the verse. Of the first fruits, but not all the first fruits. For not all fruits are subject to the duty of bringing to the temple their first fruits. Only the 7 chief kinds of products of Palestine alone. For there's mentioned here Eretz, the land, right? Asher tavi me'eretzecha, that brought you to the land, and it states in Deuteronomy a land of wheat and barley, etc., thus suggesting the connection that the fruits of the land referred to here, those enumerated there. So we have otherwise known as the 7 species. Now, if you were watching my Erev Tov show last week, you would know that I tried to embark on some of the 7 species in my drink. So the drink contained grapes, and it contained, there was some other fruit, pomegranate juice. So because the 7 species are wheat, barley, pomegranates, olives, grapes, wheat, barley, dvash, honey, but honey of dates, and the one, of course, I don't remember, that I can't remember now, figs. We're going to need that later on. So those are 7 species that come from the land of Israel. So of the first fruits, it has to be that, because now we've gone from the slavery of the Exodus of Pesach to this freedom of being our own farmers in the land of Israel. It must be from those fruits of the 7 species. So what else does Rashi says? What is it that Scripture is speaking of there? Of the 7 products to which the land of Israel is distinguished. So to here it speaks only of the distinguished products of the land of Israel, which are 7 species only. So the 7 species, it is Merishit from the first. The other commentators go on to say it doesn't have to be just the first, but it has to be of the first the best. So now we have this other distinction that we've come into this land. We are always worried that, or the Torah and the prophets are worried, you're going to come into this land, it's going to go well for you. You're going to sit back and say, okay, I have to fulfill these commandments. But what do I do it with? Well, it has to be done with Mereshit, from the first, from the best. That's the goal. And then what happens? Well, after you're bringing your fruits, you have to say something. And these verses you're familiar with from the Haggadah of Pesach, and thus we have this connection, another connection moving from Pesach to Shavuot. You shall then recite as follows: before the Lord your God, my father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery and our oppression. The Lord freed us from Egypt by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm and awesome power, and by signs and portents. He brought us to this place and gave us this land, again a land flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore now I bring the first fruits of the soil which you, O Lord, have given me. You shall leave it before the Lord your God and bow low before the Lord your God. So we have this connection. Now we're going to get to some interactive parts. I'm looking at the clock. We have time. Why this section? Why are we saying this section? Why do we have to make? Why do you think there has to be this connection made from Pesach to Shavuot, and the worshiper has to actually talk about that connection? Why do we think? You can raise your hands. Let's see. Can I get to share? Can I get to chat? while I'm sharing. If you unmute and call out, because I can't see, let's see. Anybody have a hand up in the chat box? No? Nobody has an idea. There are no wrong answers here, just like when I teach in person. Thank you, Phyllis. Unmute yourself.
The chat is disabled.
It is? Oh, the chat is disabled. Okay, but people can unmute themselves, yes?
Correct.
Okay, good. Phyllis.
Well, it follows through because the holiday is connected by the counting of the Omer, one from one holiday to the other, the growth of the first grain. And so it follows through in that way, connecting one holiday to the other.
Okay, so but why does the individual have to state this when they bring their fruits? Why would an individual why would Torah say, now you have to say this when you bring your mereshit, you bring the best fruits of those 7 species of the land. Why do we need to say that?
To remember that we're not the person is not the only one who is responsible for the crop, but God has a role in that.
Okay, so one of the reasons, which is a good one, is that we're not responsible alone, right? And we talk a lot about that when we talk about the Shemitah and the tithing, right? The land really belongs to God, okay? And now a more psychological, emotional issue. Who wants to give it a shot?
It's an expression of gratitude.
It's
You
an
were
expression
liberated-
of gratitude
You were
from where we
liberated.
came from.
Right. You were liberated for a purpose. Now the purpose has been fulfilled. You're where you're supposed to be.
Okay, so Ed's saying we were liberated for a purpose. The purpose is to become Am Segula, God's treasured people, to get this Torah, to go into this land of Israel. And so now that has been fulfilled, we're going to give thanks. But why repeat the story? My father was a fugitive Aramean. Anybody else have an idea? Those are all good answers. I'm looking for one other emotional reason. Human reason. And really, Phyllis sort of touched on it by saying it's not God alone, but a little further. We're offering our thanks because God brought us out of Egypt. Well, there's this idea that unless we remember historically what was difficult or what was trying and what was bad, we may not be able to offer our thanks. So this is why we say, my father was a fugitive Aramean, and tells the whole story about we were enslaved and now we're free. Because if we don't remember that, well, we may, again, as the prophets were afraid of, just sit back and enjoy whatever we have and not think any place outside of ourselves. Certainly not think about God, not think about others. So this is important to think that we have to remember what happened that was bad in order to really feel the good. So it's sort of, now being in this time of Corona, COVID-19, we sit here and sometimes we have days where seems like it's pretty bad. But if we think back to other times, maybe in our own lives or other times in history, or not even think back, but think outwards to the way people are suffering currently, then maybe we should understand, this is the same kind of thing, right? We are remembering. We need to remember that so we understand how good it is. I've always had a personal problem with this because I always thought I could appreciate what was good without remembering what was bad. But it seems that psychologically, emotionally, it's better to do this way. In order you want people to pay attention, They have to go back and physically relive that journey in order to be ready to offer that thanks. So that thanks brings us to, what else do we have to do? We have these communal Shavuot obligations. So we started out here with, this is the holiday of the first fruits. We're going to celebrate. And then we had to go back to, okay, we're celebrating because we went from that place, that narrow place of Egypt, to this good place, a land flowing with milk and honey. And lo and behold, we are actually flowing with milk and honey. We're offering our thanks, but what else? And now we can really try to understand this in also a very modern sense. If we just realize, I'm so lucky, I have everything that I need, and stop right there, Torah is saying that is not enough. And even our Shavuot celebration, that is not enough to just give the thanks and bring our first fruits. It stops short of going back to what Rabbi Bauer said, really to embody the Eshet Chayil, to embody Torah. You have to go further than just, here you go, God, here you go, priest, there is more, right? So let's see what Deuteronomy 26:12 says, and we'll continue. When you have set aside in full the 10th part of your yield in the 3rd year, the year of the tithe, and have given it to the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, they may eat their fill in your settlements. So they may eat within thy gates and be satisfied, Rashi says. And what does that mean? Give them sufficient to satisfy them. From here, the rabbis derive the law one must give to the poor in the barn no less than half a cob of wheat or cob of barley. So when you have set aside your 10th in the 3rd year and you've given it to the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, right? They must eat. They must have their full. It has to be given. But now let's continue further on. I'm going to go back to a Leviticus text. If I scroll down. When you're gathering et katsir, artzachem, when you're gathering the gleanings of your land, when you reap the harvest of your land. Look, the English is right here for me. And you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I, the Lord, am your God. Now, this comes to tell us at what time, when you reap the harvest of your land. Now, this is not the only harvest reaping time, right? We have Sukkot also, but this is going to be the first one, the one following Pesach. This is the first harvest. So when you reap the harvest, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field. You leave it for the poor. So we have, you give your tithe, and then you must make sure, we go back to the Deuteronomy text, when you've set it inside, the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, they may eat, okay? That goes, part of the tithe goes to them. And now, also the edges of your field. So now we are also expanding our understanding of what are we supposed to do on Shavuot? What does this festival mean? How are we giving back to God? Oh, we're not only giving back to God. Chizkuni, French commentator, 13th century. Uvkutzarchem et katzir artzachem. He's explaining those words. When you reap the harvest of your land. Seeing that the principal period of harvesting commences around the time of Shavuot, the Torah chose to speak of this season first when discussing special laws of benefit to the poor connected with the act of collecting the harvest. And he's just explaining what I just explained, leaving the corn of your field uncut for the poor themselves and not gleaning anything that may have been dropped. So we talked about that harvest. Don't reap it all the way. Seforno, Italian, 16th century. The many faceted functions of God are alluded to here. That God's supervision is needed at all stages of the growing of the crop. He is the God of the reapers, the God of the collectors. God says that my regulations are designed to be beneficial for you, the grower, for the poor who collects the gleanings. I will deal beneficially with those who have already demonstrated their concern for others by complying with the legislation set forth here. So Forno is understanding this. He's commenting, and I'm going to scroll back up to that verse. Leviticus 23:22. The last three words over here, Ani Adonai Elohechem, I am your God. Someone says, what does that mean? What does that mean, I'm your God? We were told to leave your corners of your field, let the poor have it. That's part of what you must do for Shavuot. But now, I am your God. And Soprano explains, I am the God of everybody. Those are the farmers and the poor. And sort of, if you don't follow the rules, your success will be limited. So that is in the words, I am your God. So Forno understands that's a little bit, not that I am your God is conditional, but your success will be conditional on realizing I am your God. And what kind of God am I? What am I? I'm the God of the reapers too. I'm the God of the collectors. I am the God of the poor also. So in order to become very successful or maintain your produce, I am Adonai, your God. I am your God. You have to really remember that. Questions, comments about God moving into here with a little bit of a conditional idea. Okay, moving on. Moving on, we're almost done with our texts. Okay. So back to Deuteronomy text. Again, now, what is the festival? We're bringing the fruits, we know the poor. Let's see what Deuteronomy says here. Ve'samachta lifnei Adonai Elohecha ata vincha uvitcha va'avadecha va'amatacha asher bish'arecha ve'hager ve'hayitom, I need my glasses, ve'ha'almana asher birkirba asher birkirba Ba'molam yivchar Adonai Elohecha leshaken shemo sham. You shall rejoice before the Lord your God with your son and your daughter, your male and female slave, the Levite in your communities, and the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your midst, at the place where the Lord your God will choose. And we heard this. We heard those four parts. We heard before, you shall rejoice with the reading to Beth, the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. That's part of the celebration we just read. But here we have more. Your son and daughter, your male and female slave. So now, male slaves, female slaves, family, widows, strangers or proselyte, fatherless, the orphans, the Levites, everybody, in order to celebrate your festival, the festival to God, you must make sure that everybody's included in the celebration. Everybody has to be included, and so everybody's included by even more than just leaving the corners of the field, but what we read in the tithe before, make sure they have enough. Make sure you have enough. So, and this is what Rashi was saying, going through this, again, connection with God and human being. The Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, the widow. These four are mine, corresponding to four that are yours. Your son, your daughter, your manservant, and your maidservant. If you gladden mine, I will gladden yours. I go back to also, go back to that idea up here of I, the Lord, am your God. If you gladden mine, I will gladden yours. And how do we do that? We have to give from this Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. So we're so happy. We come in at Shavuot. Yay! We got this land and it is flowing with milk and honey. And God stops you. Nope. All that is true. And to really fulfill what's going on here, you better make sure that you share. So the other Haftarah for Shavuot is from the prophet Habakkuk. Now, this gets a little harsh because all of these beautiful things that I put together, the prophets are less trusting in human beings to do the right thing. They not so happy with that we're going to make the right and good choices. And so, like many of the prophets, there is destruction in the land, but this is where we still survive. Though the fig tree does not bud, and no yield is on the vine, though the olive crop has failed, and the fields produce no grain, and those from the 7 species, though sheep have vanished from the fold, and no cattle are in the pen, yet will I rejoice in the Lord, exult in the God who delivers me. My Lord God is my strength. God makes my feet like the deer, and lets me stride upon the heights, for the leader with instrumental music. So we've been in the land. It's been great. Zavat chalav udvash. We've had the instructions of how to tithe, the Levite, right, how to tithe, how to give to the poor, the vulnerable, that's part of this. There's no celebration without this. And seems like Habakkuk didn't work out for this time, and it's gone. It's gone, but it's not going to be gone forever, because God will deliver again, and I'll still be able to exalt in the God who delivers me. And I think this is such it pulls Shavuot back around to, again, a very personal way that we understand our role with Torah, but also a very personal way, I think, of how many of us would do well to think about what we're going through right now. Where is our strength? We are so better off than most. And even us, we get stuck in the mire of, it's boredom. It's still very, very stressful what we're going through, even though we have comforts in food. It does probably minimize stress, but there's still plenty of stress of the things that we cannot do, the people we can't see, the things we can't take care of. And yet, even though we've on this down slope, and yet I will rejoice because there will be a deliverance. And so the prophet for Shavuot wants to say the abundance may not be there as we know it, but we can get that strength again, and we don't know if we're getting it back the way we had it before. The prophet doesn't say we're not. He doesn't wind us back around to Zavat chalav udvash. It may be something different, but there will still be a deliverance, and there still will be this powerful connection, and we'll still be saved from this destruction. There's no fig on the tree. There is still a future and strength in God. And so our fig trees may look differently in the future, but we will have this faith and strength with Torah to keep going. Questions, comments? That's a lot of lightning talking in the 27 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Hands, comments? I'll scroll back up. No? Okay. Well, 6:58 then. We are about ready to pass on to Rabbi Greengrass. I don't know if she's up here yet or not.
I'm here. Hi.
Hi.
Great lesson, Rabbi Kleppi.
Thanks. I'm going to stop my screen, and there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So hi, everybody. It's wonderful to spend the beginnings of Shavuot with you. You may know that this is the holiday where, well, now you know for sure that we anticipate receiving Torah at Sinai, and there is a tradition to stay up all night studying Torah. So if you're like me, when you hear we're going to stay up all night studying Torah, you get very intimidated, because if you're not asleep by 10 p.m., your whole life is going to fall apart, because that's what happens to me. I have always been terrible at sleeping in. Even when I was a college kid staying up till 2 in the morning, I would wake up at 6 a.m. It was a problem. But for most of us, maybe staying up late and being able to sleep in isn't what intimidates you. Maybe it's this forte, this feat of studying Torah. And so I wanted to talk to you guys tonight about how our ancestors, in fact, could sleep in. That was part of the problem. Rabbis teach us that they slept in the day we were supposed to receive Matan Torah. And so that's why we stay up all night getting ready to receive Torah, to show that we can do better in our generation. But I wanted you to see that not only can you maybe sleep in, but I want you to see that you can, in fact, be a Torah scholar. And I wanted to do that by having you look at someone who we can all agree is a Torah scholar, Moses. So I'm going to share with you my handout. And I'm going to ask some of you guys to read, okay? I can see who's on here. So I'll ask some of you to read for me. Okay, so here we go. Can you see it? Is it big enough? Do I need to make it bigger? All right. I think I can make it bigger. Okay, there we go. Okay, so our first passage that I want to read us to read is from Masechet Nedarim 38a. And this brings a teaching of Rabbi Yochanan's about the way in which Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our rabbi, our teacher, received and learned Torah. So Phyllis, would you mind reading that first paragraph for us, this number 1? You're muted. Oh, she can't unmute. Okay. All right, we have a tech coming in to help. All right, I will ask somebody else to read. I'm sorry, Phyllis. All right, Sherry.
Okay, I can read. Number 1, and Rabbi Yohanan said, initially Moses would study Torah and forget it until it was given to him as a gift, as it is stated, and he gave it to Moses when he concluded speaking with him.
Okay, thank you. So this seems like a line that you might just read over, but look at what it says. It says, initially, Moses would study Torah and just forget it, right? So how many times has that happened to you, right? I don't know if you have kids and they're doing, differential equations or geometry, and you're like, I know I learned that at some point. For me, it's like my son is learning all of the capitals of all of the states and all of the different countries, and I always say, like, I used to know those. I can still do it the opposite way. If they tell me the city, I can tell you where it is. But right, like, there's so many things that we learn and we just kind of forget it. We learn it and we forget it. So Moses was only able to remember Torah once it was given to Moses as a gift. So I want us to look at this because being compared to Moses is a very intimidating thing. Studying Torah can be an intimidating thing because there's so much. The rabbis compare it to a sea, that even if you spend your whole life studying, it's like you've put your toe in a sea of Talmud, okay? It can be a very intimidating thing. But if we can look at this and say that even Moses, wasn't this phenomenal natural learner, maybe we could be learners too. So we might think that what was so difficult about it is just the sheer vastness of the Torah. But it also might be that Moses wasn't the most amazing of students. So we see that so many of our leaders are talked about as wise, right? Solomon notoriously was the wisest king. We hear that Jacob was crafty, all of these things. But I want you to think about, to look at what wisdom looks like from the rabbinic perspective. And then we're going to look at what it looks like from Moses's perspective. So I wanted to give you this text. I didn't write where it's from, but it's Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, verse 8. And I would like to have Pamela Lear please read it to us. Can you read number 2 for us?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai received the oral tradition from Hillel and Shammai. He used to say, if you have learned much Torah, do not claim credit for yourself, because for such a purpose were you created. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 disciples, and they were these: Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Joshua ben Hananiah, Rabbi Yosei the priest, Rabbi Shimon ben Nathaniel, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach. He, Rabbi Johanan, used to list their outstanding virtues. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is a plastered cistern which loses not a drop. Rabbi Joshua ben Hananiah, happy is the woman that gave birth to him. Rabbi Yosei the priest is a pious man. Rabbi Simeon ben Nathaniel is one that fears sin. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach is like the spring that ever gathers force. He, Rabbi Yochanan, used to say, if all the sages of Israel were on one scale of the balance and Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus on the other scale, he would outweigh them all. Abba Shaul said in his name, if all the sages of Israel were on one scale of the balance and Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus also with them, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach on the other scale, he would outweigh them all.
Okay, thank you. Beautifully read, Pamela. So basically, you have this teacher who's complimenting his 5 students. They all have different gifts. And when you get to the end, you kind of see whose gifts are valued the most. Okay, so the first one, where they say Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, if he was on one side of the scale and everybody else was on the other, he would outweigh them all. Okay, so what do we get there? I'm sorry that the pages are hard to flip back and forth. What he is compared to is a cistern. So basically, he's compared to a jug, right, that catches water and holds everything, right? So metaphorically, for Torah, this is somebody, they hear it once, they remember it. These are those, the people who have photographic memories. I can't even say it. I'm so far from that. Photographic memories, who just remember everything. They can recite it back. And for the time, that was hugely important because this was oral Torah. People would memorize it. So here was someone who was literally a cistern holding oral Torah. They could reproduce it by saying it. So what are some of the benefits of that, and what are some of the maybe drawbacks of that? Why would somebody ever pick somebody else as a favorite? What do you think? You can unmute yourself.
All right.
Ed, thank you.
Well, as you said, memory is a valuable skill, but in order to apply knowledge, you have to go beyond memorizing facts and material. You have to be able to reason from it and apply it. So that's the Eliezer ben Arach advantage. He's gathering force. He's taking the knowledge that he's received and going farther with it.
Beautiful. Okay, yes. So you can hold it, you can memorize it, right? But you can get a parrot to memorize things, right? If you don't know what it means, if you can't apply it, then is that really so valuable? And thank you, Ed, for bringing us to Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, his favorite student. which is Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach, who is compared to a fountain. So notice both of them have water imagery, right? So the cistern catches all of the water and holds it and keeps it and doesn't lose a drop. But the fountain is different, right? The fountain is producing water. So here we have this image of Eliezer ben Arach, who can produce learning and knowledge and, you know, new interpretations and understanding. So I'd love to hear, we heard a little bit from Ed, how that could be a benefit. What are other ways that could be a benefit, or ways that could be maybe problematic sometimes?
Well, he's sharing knowledge, which is good. But if he's only sharing knowledge and not also getting it from others, or other opinions, other ideas, then that is not equality.
Okay, so maybe he's so busy producing that he's not taking in as much as he should. I like that. Any other ideas? All right, so I think it's beautiful. I would say, in addition to that, sometimes if we're creating and creating, you know, a spring that can't be tapped can be a dangerous thing, right? There can be floods. So in the same way, the quality might not always be there, or he might be too creative, right? So our rabbis like a very fine balance. On the Reform end, we like a little bit more of that creativity. Okay, so this is the Talmudic ideal of who learners are. Okay, so now let's look at who Moses is as a learner. So this next section, number 3, is from Vayikra, from Leviticus, and it happens immediately after 2 of Aaron's sons are struck dead. They offer a strange fire, and their lives are taken. And so then this happens. Okay, so who's going to read? Judy, will you read for me?
Sure. Then Moses inquired about the goat of sin offering, and it had already been burned. He was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining son, and said, "Why did you not eat the sin offering in the sacred area? For it is most holy, and he has given it to you to remove the guilt of the community and to make expiation for them before the Lord. Since its blood was not brought inside the sanctuary, you should certainly have eaten it in the sanctuary as I commanded." And Aaron spoke to Moses, "See, this day they brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and such things have befallen me. Had I eaten sin offering today, would the Lord have approved?" And when Moses heard this, he approved.
Okay. So it's a little hard to follow. It's its own little Torah study here. But basically what's happening is Moses gets upset because he thinks that Eleazar and Itamar are not going about the sin offerings and eating the truma properly. And then Aaron says to him, "You're wrong." I know that's hard to see, but he's saying, no, if they would have done that, what you're saying, I probably would have lost another child. And Moses hears this and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're right." So we see here that Moses is corrected by his brother in terms of the priestly sacrifices and what's proper in this moment. Another place where we see Moses being corrected. So this is from Berachot 55a. This is very strange. Okay. It just doesn't want me to be able to turn pages. Here we go. Okay. So, okay. I don't know why I might have to leave and then click on the right page. I apologize. There it is. Okay. Oh my gosh. Why won't it do this? Okay, hold on. I'm gonna share a different way. So we get from this first text, though, that I just shared with you, that Moses is corrected by his brother. So I want to share with you another piece, and I'm just going to do it in a little bit of a less pretty way so that I can actually turn the pages. Here we go. Okay. All right, so we are on the fourth text. All right, so here we go, Brachot 55a. So this is the building of the Mishkan. And for those of you who study, which most of you who are on this call are regular Torah study attendees, you'll know that we get all of the instructions for building the Mishkan. We repeat the instructions for the building of the Mishkan. We build the Mishkan, right? We read it like 3 times, all of these instructions. Good pedagogy is that if you want to learn something, you need to hear it 6 times. You can imagine that's what's happening. Gilad, would you feel comfortable reading? You're on me. There you go. Perfect.
Okay. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said that Rabbi Yonatan said, Bezalel was called by that name on account of his wisdom. When the Holy One blessed Moses, go say to Bezalel, make a tabernacle, an ark, and vessels. Moses went and reversed the order and told Bezalel, make an ark and vessels and a tabernacle. He said to Moses, Moses, our teacher, the standard practice throughout the world is that a person builds a house and only afterwards places the vessels in the house. And you say to me, make an ark and vessels and a tabernacle. If I do so in the order you have commanded, the vessels that I make, where shall I put them? Perhaps God told you the following, make a tabernacle, ark, and vessels. Moses said to Bezalel, perhaps you were in God's shadow, and you, Bezalel, and you knew precisely what he said. You intuited God's commands just as he stated them, as if you were there.
Beautifully read. Thank you. So here we get a little bit of text where we see that Moses messed it up, right? Moses repeated incorrectly, and Bezalel said that didn't really make sense. But once he heard Bezalel corrected, he said, that's right. Were you there? Right? This is pretty amazing. But not only is it that we see from other people a little bit in the rabbinic eye, right? Because these are Talmudic passages that perhaps Moses wasn't not that he wasn't smart, but like I'm trying to make him a little less intimidating to us. But Moses himself also is critical. Remember, when he's called by God to go and speak to the people and to share with them words of Torah, he keeps saying, like, call on somebody else, right? They're not going to listen to me. I'm not that special. And what does he say? He says, I am a man of kaved peh. All right, so here we have Rashi's comment to that, which is his understanding of what that means is I speak heavily, right? Because kaved is heavy, right? That's why we say kavod is honor, right? Because we treat the person with importance, with heaviness. I speak with difficulty. And so then he uses an old French word, which means that he had a stammer. So So some of you may have learned this growing up. There's a beautiful midrash about how he got his speech impediment, but you might have heard that he had a stammer. But that's not the only interpretation of what this might have meant. So if you go to Midrash Tanchuma, and this particular translation was done by Martin Buber, I would just say, like, for me, it's like the easiest translation to be able to follow and understand. We get a little bit of a different understanding of what this means. And I'll read this text. Okay, these are the words that Moses spoke. This text is related to this passage from Isaiah. Then the lame shall leap like a hart, and the tongue of the dumb shall shout for joy. All right, so they're comparing the tongue of the dumb to Moses, right? Moses is now speaking, right? You say he has a stutter, he can't really speak. Well, come on, and we see him speaking for the rest of the Torah. Okay, come and see. And this is from the Tanchuma to Deuteronomy 1:2. When the Holy One said to Moses, I will send you to Pharaoh, Moses said to God, you're doing me an injustice. I am not a man of words, he said to him. 70 languages are spoken in Pharaoh's palace. And it's using Greek words here. That's what those words are. Thus, if an embassy comes from another place, they speak with them in their own language. And when I go on your mission, they'll examine me, asking whether I'm a representative of the omnipresent. Then it'll be revealed to them that I don't know how to converse with them. Will they not laugh at me, saying, look at this agent of the one who created all the world and all its languages? Does he not know how to listen and reply? See here, something is wrong. Okay, so what's his argument here? Why is he saying he's not the right person? He doesn't say here he has a stutter. What does he say? Ed?
He's not a language scholar. He doesn't have all the languages that he needs.
Right.
No, it's not even just that. He doesn't know how to talk to them. Not just the language, but the way to. I think it's a little bit different.
Okay, beautiful. So it might be that I like both understanding. Right. Okay, so that maybe he doesn't have like the political savvy to know how to say it, but also, you know, how does he speak, right? Shouldn't he be able to speak in every language? I always, you think about Moses being raised in the palace. Of course he knows how to speak Egyptian, right? He might be saying he doesn't know how to speak Hebrew. It's very possible that at this point, when he's being called, he's never lived amongst his people. He might not know how to speak the language yet. There's another commentary, which I didn't include, which talks about different letters in Hebrew and how they sound similar, and said that he had trouble pronouncing them differently. And so he sounded kind of when I try and speak Spanish, right, how I sound like I have horrible pronunciation, that he was kind of saying the same thing. Okay, so here's another way that maybe he doesn't speak the language. He doesn't feel like he has the mastery of it. And then Sforno gives us a different interpretation. Okay. Sherry, will you read for me?
Okay. Let me see.
It's number
I
7.
know, I see it. The reason why I do not possess the facility is because the physical tools with which to express my thoughts are defective. I have therefore never even made the effort to develop this facility, to know how to speak timely words to the weary.
Okay. So here it's something different, right? What does Sforno think that Moses is saying? Not that he doesn't have a stutter, not that he doesn't speak the language, but
He was born like that, and that's what he has to deal with.
right, but born like what?
with tools that do not help him speak well.
Right. He's saying
He's
here,
defective.
right, he sees himself as defective, right? He has some sort of, it seems like there's some sort of like logic disconnect. Okay. So why do I want to share this? I think it's important for us to know this about Moses because it teaches us that Torah is really for everyone. And knowing that Torah was given to and then through, right, someone who had maybe maybe limited intellectual abilities, maybe a stammer, maybe struggled with the language, it forces us to reframe for ourselves what it means to be a successful student of the Torah. Okay. So maybe a successful student of Torah is not the top of the class. Maybe a successful student of the Torah isn't someone who has the ability to just sit and learn for hours on end. They can be successful, but you don't necessarily have to be those people. Maybe a successful student of Torah doesn't even look to study all of the time. So I want to give you this other quote. We started with a quote from Rabbi Yochanan, and so I wanted to have that be our last quote be from him as well. Right, who am I going to pick on now? Paul, will you read? You're muted. There we go. Thank you.
What does the verse indicate in writing? For the lips of the priest guard wisdom, and Torah shall be brought from his mouth, because he is an angel of the Lord of hosts. If the Rav is similar to an angel of the Lord of hosts, they shall seek Torah from his mouth. But if not, they shall seek Torah. They shall not seek Torah from his mouth.
Beautiful. So here it's talking about what do we look for in a teacher? And it doesn't say that your teacher necessarily has to be the smartest person or be able to recite the most verses from memory. Here, it's saying they should be an angel of the Lord. So what do you think that means?
Shaliach.
Okay, give me more. Give me more. I understand, but a messenger of what?
Channeling what the Lord wants.
Okay, so somebody who embodies Torah, somebody who gives the like right feelings, not just the right words, but really like the correct messages. So when he teaches us, when Rabbi Yochanan teaches us, Moses needed to receive Torah as a gift rather than achieve Torah. We learn that the ideal student of Torah is not determined only by intellectual ability. But here, Rabbi Yochanan takes us one step further in saying that even when we're looking for a teacher of Torah, intellectual ability shouldn't be the prominent factor. It shouldn't be the first thing we look for. What we should be looking for instead are like angelic qualities: goodness, patience, devotion. The smartest person in the world might not be a good person. And hopefully we can find someone who is both, but goodness takes precedence. So as we this evening have prepared to reenact this receiving of Torah from Mount Sinai, as we stay up and we study, I hope we can take Rabbi Yochanan's lesson to heart. I hope it inspires us to move beyond learning Torah just academically, but moves us to allow Torah to shape us, to really try and become good people. Because Torah study is not about what the Torah says, it's about what the Torah means. Torah study is not, there just for us to be able to show off how many verses we can read, or how many people we can quote. It's there for us to say, I've taken Torah into my heart, and this is how I'm going to live my life in a different way. This is how I'm going to be a better person, how I'm going to show more love, bring more of, as Paul said, be a shaliach of the message of Torah, which is one of love and of caring and of being God's hands here on earth. And so if Moses wasn't perfect, either in the rabbinic mind or in his own, we don't have to be either. We just have to really give our hearts over to Torah. All right, so that is my lesson. 7:30 on the nose.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. So I know we have our service beginning in 15 minutes. So I don't know if I am supposed to field any questions or if we are supposed to log off and then tune in. So I'm going to ask our host.
I think we can go ahead and log off unless anyone has something else that they would like to offer or ask, or while we have all these rabbis in here, take advantage of it. But if not, we encourage you to log on to tbam.org/streaming in about 15 minutes. It should also be streaming on our Facebook page, but we recommend you watch it at our live stream site.
And scheduled for tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Shavuot with services with Yisker and the parallel young children's service, little people. And then tomorrow night, also Shabbat services.
And Andrea, thank you to you as well for producing this program.
My pleasure. I'm going to take us out with a little bit more Nina Simone singing Eretz Zavat Chalav. Chag Shavuot Sameach. Every